He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
Welcome to The Marlow Show. I'm glad you're here. We got a busy show today. Trisha McLaughlin is here. She's from the Department of Homeland Security. She's sort of been tasked with, I think, the main media comms position, and I think she's officially an assistant secretary. But I think that what she's doing is really selling the centerpiece of Trump's agenda in a lot of media. She does a great job, and I think you'll see that she breaks some news on the show as well. So we'll have that for you in a little bit. Before I get into the rest of the news, I want to tell you about something all of you homeowners in America, you need to be able to follow along with this. The FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud on the rise called title theft, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on a single document. They use a fake notary stamp and file it with the county. And just like that, on record, they own your home. Using your ownership, they can take out loans against your equity or even sell your property, and you won't even know about it until foreclosure or collection notices start showing up in the mail. It's not that hard, I'm sad to say, to do this. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can protect your equity and find out today if you're already a victim. You can use my promo code MARLOW, M-A-R-L-O-W, at HometitleLock.com, and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. So this is the triple lock protection. This is important. 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud occurs, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix it. That's generous. So I had a great interview with hearing more. You guys can see this if you go back on my feed, scroll back through a few shows, and you'll be able to see this where we break all this down for you. But the triple lock description, I think this is just really big. With the 24/7 monitoring, the urgent alerts for any changes, and then the $1 million of protection to fix it is just seems like the way to go if you're serious about protecting your identity. And who isn't right now? I'm super paranoid about all this stuff. So that's HometitleLock.com, promo code Marlow, HometitleLock.com, promo code Marlow. If you're watching any of these, we'll put the link up there as well for you to get. All right. Let's get in the news. The immigration-centric show, even if Trisha wasn't going to be here, and we had her locked in. I got a couple other non-immigration items. But some big news in terms of just ICE getting targeted, Department of Homeland Security getting targeted. Mexican cartels are offering a $50,000 bounty to kill ICE agents and border agents. $50,000 to kill ICE agents and border agents. Just not good. And it is something that the media is just blowing through this. They're acting like there's no big deal. There are enabling violence from the institutional left. Illegal alien rams into a Border Patrol car in Chicago. This is another fresh story that we've got. We've got the left-wing groups releasing instructions on how to fight ICE in Chicago. These are incredibly violent people who are running the institutional left at this time, and people are making excuses for them because politicians see, again, anything that affirms Trump's agenda, they're not for it. And that's why Tom Homan was saying that Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, they should be saying thank you. Trisha McLaughlin is going to have a similar sentiment for Brandon Johnson in Chicago and J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. These people don't get it. But what they do get is they feel like their base believes that ICE are the villains and the criminal illegal aliens are the good guys, which is just insane. And we can't have a lot of tolerance for this because we're going to get people killed. And this is why I'm going to ask Trisha about what recruitment's like for ICE. And I got a feeling people are understanding that the threat that illegal immigration is posing, the cartels, the fentanyl, the gangs, the human trafficking, all the detail we got into with Tom Homan on last week's show on Friday. Those of you, if you missed that, I don't, again, as I said, I don't know what you're here for because that's as good as I can do. 40 straight minutes, Tom Homan, getting him to tear up a couple of times. It's good stuff, but it's a very grave threat that we've got. We've been tracking the cartels at Breitbart News since 2012, 2013, whenever it was that we launched our Cartel Chronicles initiative. These are extremely brutal people, and they want to flood our country with drugs. They want to engage in sex trafficking. They are raping pretty much every woman who comes up, particularly the younger ones. And what are we seeing from our political class? We're seeing, I think, really clear-eyed steeliness from the Trump administration. But one Democrat after the next either enabling or outright working against ICE. we're seeing this in Los Angeles right now. Los Angeles County has declared a state of emergency over ICE arresting illegal aliens. I mean, I've got some of these quotes, you have to see it to be believed, but this is from the supervisor, Janice Hahn. What's happening across Los Angeles County is an emergency. It may not be a wildfire or an earthquake, but it's a man-made emergency created by our own federal government. I want our residents to know that we are in crisis with them, and I want us to have every tool at our disposal in this effort. Sorry, I caught a typo on my own website. For that reason, I think the emergency proclamation is not just symbolically important as a message to our residents, but critical to our response moving forward. So I'll tell you, it is symbolic. I mean, I know practically, I don't think this changes anything on the way ICE imposes things. But what really is striking to me about this is that the assessment that people are living in fear. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors saying that ICE's actions have caused widespread fear. ICE arrests of illegal aliens causing widespread fear, leading to decreased attendance at workplaces, disruption of local economies, and strain on critical services such as schools, hospitals, and places of worship. So let me tell you something, guys. Tell something flat out. Unless you're an illegal alien, you have nothing to fear. The only fear that you could have is you're an illegal alien. If you were to get stopped because you got racially profiled, which is not what's happening, but if you were stopped because you're racially profiled and you say, no, I'm a citizen, check out my legit ID, which confirms I'm a citizen, and here are my papers, if you're really that concerned, then you're going to be good to go. They're trying to bust criminal illegal aliens. That's what the focus is on. It's very clear that's what the focus is on. And the nonviolent, they're trying to get them to self-deport, but it's not, they're not rounding up people who are the nonviolent. That's not the point. I'm not saying that you couldn't get caught up in a dragnet. You could, of course. But you risked that when you came to this country illegally. If you came to this country illegally, you had to know that one day maybe that wouldn't work out for you anymore. Maybe a new administration would come in and they would have a less favorable view to people who break our laws. But the goal is to get nonviolent illegal aliens. And you see this lying, that the widespread fear, it isn't the widespread fear for American citizens that these policies are causing fentanyl to flood our streets, that are enabling human trafficking, that are making our system much more expensive because it's very expensive to educate illegal aliens. It's expensive to give them health care, which they get. And it just upends social cohesion, all that stuff where we're undermining the fabric of our country, our own sovereignty. We don't have to live in fear. We citizens who pay in as taxpayers. No, the people who should live in fear are the illegal aliens who are guests and mostly unwanted guests who are here. So it's all hand-wringing. I mentioned this before. I'll say it again. I had a conversation with a neighbor who is not Latin American, not Hispanic, not Latino, not Latinx, whatever you want to call it. But his brown skin and was telling me that he was afraid of going downtown because he might get rounded up by ICE. This guy was never going to get rounded up by ICE. And 2 days later, my friend Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck by a violent left-wing radical. So this is what the issue with the left that's going on, is that they see the bad guys as people who are trying to enforce immigrations and customs. And they see the good guys as the violent rioters. Maybe if you pin them down, most of them would disassociate with that, but they would disavow, but not all of them. Too many of them, you saw it online, praise the Charlie Kirk assassin. At the same time, they're treating ICE as if ICE is the bad guy. So anyway, we got this No Kings protest coming up over the weekend. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to see what the left does. Their protest culture is so lame. It's all paid for. It's all organized. We'll have more reporting on that on the show for in the days and weeks to come. But I just don't think they have an organic grassroots effort because their arguments are so weak. The arguments are that we're going to go out of our way to create emergencies on behalf of the illegal aliens. And why is this? Because people don't want to have shortages at their car wash of illegal aliens who are washing their cars. And they want to have their nannies get deported, and they don't want to have people who have no right to be here be sent home because it is disruptive and it represents the current administration, Donald Trump's administration, enforcing our laws, which is vital. It's vital to living in a vibrant society. So what is this comment? It disrupts our local economy because there aren't as many illegal aliens around to wash cars. That's what they mean by that. Strains our critical services such as schools. No, it'll help the schools. I've gone through this. I'll tell you, Larry Elder, my colleague at Salem, was the pioneer of this. He was the one who was talking about how much more expensive LA Unified School District is than other public schools because we're educating people who came here illegally. And we've concluded it's better off that they're in the school system than roaming the streets. So we let them in the schools, and they're tough to educate because they don't know the culture. They don't know the language. And we try to treat them all with dignity and respect. I bring up left-wing violence because this guy, Jay Jones, who's running for attorney general in Virginia, the left is just not rushing to disavow him. Another group chat text that JD Vance was circulating on his account, where he says that where he gets challenged that you were you were hoping Jennifer Gilbert, who I think is the speaker in Virginia's children, would die. And Jay Jones's response is, yes, I've told you this before. Only when people feel pain personally do they move on policy. So willing to use violence. This is a mainstream leftist figure, and the Democrats will not condemn. They won't disavow because, as I'm reporting over and over again, most clearly in Breaking the Law, my latest New York Times bestselling book, that the left only values political victory. That's all they care about. That's their number one priority. And anything that they think gets them in that direction, that's what they do. So they're not going to disavow a guy late in a campaign when that means handing a seat over to Republicans. They will never do that. So that's their objective. That's what they're all about. And I'll tell you that legacy, I believe, comes from Barack Obama. So yesterday I played a snippet of an Obama interview with Mark Maron, Mark Maron's a liberal podcaster and has done very well in the space. He does comedy. He does a lot of self-effacing humor and occasionally has some insight, but is mostly too left-wing for me. But he's going to stop his podcast after 16 years. The left's very upset about this. And I played a clip yesterday of Obama, who was on his last guest, and Obama seemed like a sad boy. And I was asked to opine about a different clip on Laura Ingram's show yesterday, and it's done very well on socials. I'm not going to play for you all my media hits, particularly not all the Fox ones, but I'm looking at the numbies on this one, and I'm looking at the snippet that Laura put on her account. Has got 4,400 retweets and 24,000 likes so far, that's a lot for me. Those are big time numbers on social, so that's probably a lot for anyone, but especially for me, who's not been a big X the Everything app user. Did you guys catch, by the way, before I go any further? So X the Everything app now is considering taking away the payout structure that they have for high engagement accounts. So on X now, you can get paid a small amount of money for having a highly engaged account. We have a very popular X account at Breitbart, and I think it gets us a few $100 a month, so it's not a lot of money. But some people are very motivated by it, and the X apparently reports are that the X brass are now considering whether or not this is just leading to massive engagement farming, people who are just stealing and repurposing other people's content and using that to get engagement, and a lot of disinformation and things that are designed to gin up the public and divide us, but also get a lot of attention rather than actually report the truth or just engage in the platform on a good faith level. And I got to tell you, I could have seen that coming. I've been saying this, guys. I like that X has become a safe space for conservatives to some degree because we've never had one. The left has a million of them, and it's kind of fun for us to have it. And whenever I go on to X now and I post something, 9 out of 10 times it's always just going to be greeted with either tepid applause or great applause. It's a very comfortable space, but it's not better than it was. When it used to be a place where there was more equal representation, it was a good way for me to survey the news and what the left was thinking. And my feed is just so much hatred and so many conspiracies and just the most provocative content. And I used to be a place where I could go to as a cheat sheet for the news, and now it's just all provocation, all that. And some things, I hate this expression, but it could apply here. Maybe it is what it is. Maybe there's no going back, but I don't think it's been this big of an improvement, I got to say. So it's just my take on it. And I know that I've been in the minority on that on the right, and I still participate in the platform, and I will. But I do like to point out that maybe they're even realizing maybe this isn't better, where we're paying people a few $100s, but all they're doing is just trying to incite. They're just trying to incite, and they're not trying to do anything productive with the forum. So you don't always have to be productive. You can be fun, and I see that argument, but it's not what I prefer on a personal level. Anyway, back to Barack Obama on Mark Maron's show. I was asked to opine about it on Laura Ingraham. I'll play a minute of that, and then I'll tell you more about the rest of the interview. Here's me on Laura.
I mean, Barack Obama really, there was the war room under Bill Clinton, but Barack Obama's team, the people behind him, were really the most vicious, hateful people. First time I'm proud to be an American nonsense, right? And the apology tour down the line.
Yeah, Laura, I really loved this interview. It was a great comfort to me as a MAGA conservative because he was so weak and lame. You could even look at his posture, the way he's sitting with his legs crossed and his arms folded. He looks very sad. And it was Mark Maron's last podcast, which he's a liberal stalwart, and that was very sad. So it was all this sad environment. But he's come to grips with something important. He understands Donald Trump is a total rejection of Obamaism. And all of his ideas that he goes through in this interview, it's environmentalism, it's politics of race, it's DEI stuff, all of that's been rejected. He said he wanted to move on from being a player to a coach. Well, how's he doing as a coach? His bench is terrible. So he knows they're in dire straits, and he has no idea what to do to get back in the ring at an effective level. So it was awesome for me. The rest of the interview is on Breitbart.com, if those of you care about that stuff. But I did watch. It was an hour, and there's some moments that I thought were interesting, but it really was a sad boy interview, and I love that. And it's important to enjoy that content when we're winning, because we're running up the score. The Democrats are in disarray. The only popular people are socialists, and it's not popular at a major level. They thought that they could work this trans thing, and people are running away from that as fast as humanly possible. And they've just been so anti-science. They've so overplayed every hand they've had. And it's great. And Obama knows it, but he's kind of powerless to stop it, because he's got this thing that Trump doesn't have, is that even though Trump is a narcissistic person and is interested in his own glory, Trump also wants other people to succeed too. And he's been really great about building teams, finding the best people, trying to make sure that people are contributing to this country as a cheerleader for this country. He's always done this. And his own administration, even though he gets the ultimate glory, he's really put amazing people in position, and he tries to empower them, he tries to compliment them, and he tries to make them at their best. And Obama was never any good at that. He surrounded himself with really lame people who didn't have a bright future, and he just has been terrible about grooming the next generation of Democrat leaders, and we're really benefiting from this right now. So he said he wanted to move from player to coach. I mean, how's he doing in that regard? So we're almost 10 years since Obama left office, and the Democrats have never had worse leadership in my lifetime. I've never seen anything like it. So it is all other highlights are really lowlights from the speech, just to give you a sense of where Obama's at. And it's fun to go through these interviews because you do get clarity on where they stand. But first of all, he still looks at our history with contempt. At one point, he goes through this big laundry list of all these things that were horrible about America, from slavery to race relations to oppression of women to oppression of homosexuals, and all things that are a part of our history, but are not the main part of our history. They're big parts in some cases, obviously slavery being the biggest, but we moved past that stuff, and then now we're the greatest place on earth to be a black person. We're the greatest place on earth to be a gay person, and he's not as interested in that stuff. He's much more interested in continuing to self-flagellate for our past. And that's something that is really not, I think, appealing at a general level. I don't think people like to wake up in the morning and immediately feel bummed out. And that's where Obama's coming from. In terms of politics, he's on the same woke talking points as he was when he was relevant politically. He wants to talk about climate change, or climate change talk. He wants to talk about race relations and whether or not people who have certain races are being discriminated against in our society. It's all of these politics of yesteryear where he is too tuned out to read the room. He's not cutting edge. He's really following. He's way behind where people are. And that's a great comfort, because he was their big star, and he's completely out of touch with anything that could potentially move the needle politically. He occasionally will touch on something, how the gap between the rich and the poor is a big problem in this country. And I think it is. I think as you see a billionaire class emerge and the materialism of social media take place, where people just seem like having the best car, the best vacation, or the best watch, or the best lifestyle, the best beauty routine, the best skincare morning routine, where that's what's defining people in our increasingly secular era as being a problem. I think he's correct about this, and he gets into it probably not as well as I do, to be frank, but he gets into it a little bit, but he doesn't have any solutions, and he's part of the problem because he always cozied up to the plutocratic billionaires, particularly from Hollywood and Democrat establishment. And he never ended up doing a great job in making life easier for normal people. Think about Obamacare, which made healthcare worse and more expensive. Let's see. He's tried to claim the mantle of tolerance at one point, which I just don't see how that works. Post Charlie Kirk assassination, I don't see how the left can continue to do this. Mark Maron at one point said there was an ethnic cleansing in Gaza and Obama just let it go. He said it's not even genocide, it's an ethnic cleansing, which of course is false. And Obama just let that go. And then he goes into all these generic talking points about authoritarianism and about democracy. And he forgets that the Democrats rigged their own primary for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and even Donna Brazile admitted it. I have a huge section on this in Breaking the Law where I talk about how the left hates democracy. But I go through how the Democrats even admitted it, and then Elizabeth Warren basically admitted the primary was rigged and then did nothing about it because she's a fraud and a phony, by the way, fake Native American. So it's just, he's just not credible on that topic, but he keeps saying about democracy, democracy, democracy. And it just, he's not going anywhere with it. He's just saying the word democracy, even though they're the ones who are completely top down. They're controlled by the party. Yeah, it's going on from there. I don't want to bore you with the content, but he poses this scenario where what if he used the National Guard to take over Dallas to deal with crime because there's a lot of crime, and he doesn't get that we would have been cool with it, that if he sent the National Guard to fix crime in Dallas, that would be great. And we don't care that they have a Republican governor. It's a left-wing city, and maybe there's too much crime there. So if he wants to help, then help. We like law and order. But he posed this as if, Republicans would never have allowed for me to send the National Guard to clean up Dallas. Like, no, we would love it. Like, that would have been great. We like law and order. So, of course, he gets into a lot of the lawfare stuff as well, which is I cover in the Ingram interview, so I won't do as much here. But he acts as though Trump is the one who's using lawfare, even though his legacy was Joe Biden. Joe Biden was his vice president. He became president. And then Joe Biden went to work trying to debank, trying to target his political opponents, trying to lock up the J6 prisoners without due process, and then going after Donald Trump, trying to get him disqualified from the ballot and perhaps even put in jail ahead of their rematch in 2020, which Biden didn't even make it to the rematch. So he's so dishonest. He's such a liar. He says that Trump is stopping people in LA because they look Latino. That's just not what's happening at all. He's a fearmongerer, and he's become increasingly irrelevant, and for good reason. He's not in touch. He does not have an uplifting message. He's not a charismatic message. He looked incredibly sad. He looked frail. He had terrible body language, as I discussed on yesterday's show, the crossed legs and the crossed arms. And he even acts like the media's right wing. So anyway, next time, maybe I'll just go through and just pull a bunch of clips because you guys really would have delighted in it, because he just comes off as so lame and so weak. And that's terrific. That's great news for us because we want to run up the score right now, because that's the only way we're going to lock in wholesale change. We need a massive culture shift. And a lot of that does come from the politics. But just the thought that the guy who had Operation Choke Point, where he was trying to choke off the financial support for conservative things or for industries he didn't like the gun industry or payday lenders or whatever. And just the thought of the Operation Fast and Furious and the IRS targeting conservative groups. And he's the one acting like Trump's using lawfare. Just amazing. So he was terrible, and that's great. So that's why it was smiley, fun segment with Laura. All right, a couple other ones to bring up. One other legacy of Obama, I think, is Ketanji Brown Jackson. And that's because he really pushed for the DEI politics, and then his vice president, Joe Biden, went on to be president, got one Supreme Court pick, and used it specifically for a DEI hire. And I don't say this just to insult Ketanji Brown Jackson, which is very easy to do, and I'll do more in a minute. But just know that Biden said specifically he's going to pick a black woman. That's it. That's who he's going to pick. And here she is. She was at the Supreme Court, and she was declaring that congressional districts based on race are a good idea because, well, let's get her summation. Check this out.
I guess I'm thinking of it, of the fact that remedial action absent discriminatory intent is really not a new idea in the civil rights laws. And my kind of paradigmatic example of this is something like the ADA. Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act against the backdrop of a world that was generally not accessible to people with disabilities. And so it was discriminatory in effect because these folks were not able to access these buildings. And it didn't matter whether the person who built the building or the person who owned the building intended for them to be exclusionary. That's irrelevant. Congress said the facilities have to be made equally open to people with disabilities if readily possible. I guess I don't understand why that's not what's happening here. The idea in Section 2 is that we are responding to current day manifestations of past and present decisions that disadvantage minorities and make it so that they don't have equal access to the voting system, right? They're disabled. In fact, we use the word disable in Milligan. We say that's a way in which you see that these processes are not equally open.
So people don't have equal access to the voting system because they're disabled, which is why we need to be able to draw congressional districts based off of race. So basically acting as though Black people in particular, but any minority groups, are actually like disabled people. So that's what goes for a strong argument from Ketanji Brown Jackson. So that's the type of person that Joe Biden put forward as a standard bearer for liberal thought when it comes to the courts, a legacy of Barack Obama and his not just giving us Joe Biden as president, which you can thank Obama for that largely, but also for just enshrining this moment of racial obsession in our country and our culture, that we are now equating Black people to disabled people. And that's the liberals' argument for why we should be able to gerrymander based off of race. So I don't even need to apply analysis. It's so offensive, particularly to Black people, and she is a Black person. So that's where the racial stuff does backfire quite a bit. Look, their bench is so thin, and they're violent, they're angry, and they're stupid. Here's Katie Porter from California, who's going to become a favorite character particularly if she runs for governor, which I think she's going to, on the show. Check this out.
And so people were like, we gotta think every decision has to be made in tension with Trump. Soon, Trump will lose or go to prison or, I don't know, have a heart attack. I'm not sure.
We call it the hamburger.
I don't know what his demise is going to be,
Tim
but he'll have his demise. And the question will still be there. Who are we as Democrats?
And that was on the Pod Save America show, which is run by Obama's top staff members, including Obama's top speechwriter. So, and then on the show, that's what they're doing. They're getting their yucks that Trump will probably go to prison or he's going to die. And so that's what they think about. They think about death, Trump's death. These people they have nothing to offer us, and they harbor these violent tendencies, and we should be afraid of them. I played that Tish James section yesterday on yesterday's show, which was very popular, got a lot of attention at Breitbart.com, where she's screaming at us and she's using the funky voice where she's throwing in accents and affectation, trying to get people's attention. The ideas are probably illegal, definitely substance free, and very angry. And that's why we need to make sure the left is not in power. So one way to do that is to have promises made and promises kept. And one person who's living that day to day is Trisha McLaughlin, who is with the Department of Homeland Security. And she is trying to make sure that President Trump keeps his most important promises. And I spent about 20 minutes with her, and we're going to play that for you right now. All right, new guest to the show who I'm really excited to talk to, Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs for the Department of Homeland Security, Trisha McLaughlin, who has been, I think, doing a lot of the messaging work for our border security initiatives that we've had as a country under President Trump. And it's got to be a tiring job. Trisha, it's great to have you on the show. And there's a lot of stuff I want to cover today, but I want to start with these bounties that are coming from the cartels, trying to take out ICE agents, border agents, anyone who is trying to enforce our laws. And this is just not getting nearly enough attention that this is happening, because I feel like it doesn't confirm. I feel like it refutes a lot of the narratives of the people who would like to see ICE fail. So it's just not getting the attention it deserves. But describe what we know about this and how big of a threat is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, thanks so much for having me. Really respect what you're doing. What we're seeing on the ground out of Chicago and what our intelligence reports are showing us is that there are tiered bounties that are really rooted from these Mexican cartels and criminal rings. And they're using these domestic extremists on the ground as proxies to carry out their violence. So we're seeing tiers of $2,000 for kidnapping. A certain price for doxing of agents, giving the
Wow.
information to them about their family members, and then up to $50,000 to murder our law enforcement agents. And my question for J.B. Pritzker and for the Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, where's their condemnation? These are American law enforcement who are simply enforcing the rule of law. Any freedom-loving American should be disgusted by the fact that there's foreign terrorist organizations who are going after our law enforcement. It deserves to be called out for what it is.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I feel like this is something that is new to a lot of people who have been only consuming establishment media news for the last decade and a half. But at Breitbart News, we've been reporting cartels with our Cartel Chronicle initiatives, and they're really brutal. They don't just kill people, they kill them in brutal fashion in order to try to make examples, because it really is sort of a political operation as well. And you just don't want to be on their hit list. And now it seems like just about every ICE agent is, and the reaction for Democrat politicians appears to be to make it so that ICE is the bad guy.
Oh, exactly. And I know Breitbart has covered quite a bit these ICE tracking apps that are used to notify people
Yes.
where ICE law enforcement are. And what we're seeing is that cartels and other criminal rings are using these apps really as intelligence for these MS-13 gang members, Tren de Aragua, so that they can target and evade and injure and potentially, God forbid, even kill our law enforcement agents. So we've been working with the DOJ and other law enforcement partners to get these apps taken down, whether it be from Facebook and Meta to Google and everywhere in between. But we need more action on the front of the private sector. We need them to see these apps what they are, and it's enabling domestic and foreign extremists and terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the nature of these bounties, what are the agents saying about this? What are people on the ground saying about this? Because we've seen an illegal ram into border patrols in their car in Chicago over the last day or two. We've got these left-wing groups who are instructing how to fight ICE in Chicago, and it feels like there's this concerted effort by the left to fight ICE. So what are your biggest concerns? What are you up against exactly? Give us some of the nature of the threat.
Yeah, well, there's certainly safety in numbers. And I think President Trump was incredibly wise to see where this was heading and calling in the National Guard to give our law enforcement the assistance and the backing that they need, especially because, as you mentioned, our law enforcement is seeing increased threats and attacks against them. Just yesterday, there was a ramming attack against our law enforcement by 2 illegal aliens from Venezuela. We saw the same thing over the weekend. This is a new tactic that we're seeing increasingly, is that illegal aliens or violent agitators use their vehicles against our law enforcement to ram them. And then we're seeing that there is these mobs, these violent crowds who are coming out and assaulting our law enforcement as they're dealing with the fallout of those ramming incidents. We're seeing it time and time again. It seems incredibly organized and coordinated. So that's something we're certainly on the lookout for. But of course, there's also the issue with J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson. It's not just their rhetoric, but it's their conduct, telling law enforcement to stand down as our federal law enforcement is being attacked. We'll call for backup and they won't respond. We've seen that time and time again at the Broadview facility out in Chicago and other places as well when we're conducting operations.
So I have a lot of follow-ups in there, but let's talk Brandon Johnson for a second. He signed an executive order banning ICE from Chicago-owned land. Can you tell us about what the Department of Homeland Security can do to counteract this, and will it impact what you guys are able to do in Chicago?
It's really making no operational difference. It was just politics for the sake of politics. That's exactly what Brandon Johnson continues to do, and we're seeing with J.B. Pritzker as well. But we are continuing, whether it be, MS-13 gang members, Tren de Aragua murders. These are just in the recent days who we've picked up off of the streets of Chicago. So when you have Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker continuing to lie and whitewash the facts, we are getting the worst off of the streets, and we'll continue to do it with the backing of the National Guard, and we will continue to surge federal resources. This isn't going to deter us, and these bounties against our ICE law enforcement agents aren't going to deter us, and neither is the fact that J.B. Pritzker yesterday, right before the news came out about these bounties, he went and said that he was going to prosecute every last ICE law enforcement agent. These are men and women who are simply enforcing the rule of law that is on the books and Congress. They're people just like everybody else who want to go home at night and see their kids and see their families, and them cranking up the rhetoric, cranking up the conduct, dehumanizing and vilifying these law enforcement agents is having real life consequences.
Yeah, you're just continue to be one step ahead of me here, because I was going to ask about Pritzker next. He is trying to actually prosecute ICE agents and Department of Homeland Security officials, so trying to sue people for trying to enforce our laws. I don't understand. What is his plan here?
He should be thanking ICE law enforcement for actually enforcing the rule of law and getting these dangerous criminals off of Chicago's streets when he refuses to do it. I mean, we've seen it time and time again where they just have a revolving door of justice and let these very despicable individuals continue onto Chicago's streets to terrorize Americans. I don't know if you saw the recent interview with FBI Director Kash Patel, but he was saying how there's thousands and thousands of gang members in Chicago alone. So we're working actively with the FBI and Homeland Security investigations and the DEA to make sure we locate these individuals and get them off of our streets.
All right. So you mentioned some of these riots that are taking place at ICE facilities. I'm curious, who is at these facilities where they're targeting with their riots? Who's within the facilities? And then I want to ask about the organization of it. I gather that we believe these are organized riots, but do we know anything about the funding? So it's sort of a two-parter there.
Yeah, we're seeing that these are increasingly professionalized. We're seeing that these people are there day in and day out. They do this for a living. They agitate and create chaos and potentially violence as their day job. And President Trump has created a task force with the Department of the Treasury, with the FBI, Homeland Security, and other intelligence agencies to really get to the funding. Is it from foreign funding? Is it domestic? And I think that we're going to have news to announce here shortly on who really is behind some of this. But we're even seeing that some of these individuals will go from Portland to Chicago, to Los Angeles. So it really is the same actors over and over again.
Who's being detained at these facilities where they're doing the rioting?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Who's being detained there? Why are they just picking random ICE offices, or are they making any sort of specific demands here, or is it just a general anti-ICE sentiment?
It's largely an anti-ICE sentiment. I mean, we were seeing a lot of Palestinian flags at the beginning of this. Kind of the Marxist crowd seemed to be coalescing around our ICE facilities. But keep in mind, Alex, who's in these detention facilities are hardened criminals. It is the murderers, the rapists, the child pedophiles that I've mentioned. We've made a concerted effort to give the public the information on who is in these facilities, and yet they continue to protest for these individuals to be released out of Chicago. These are not serious people. These are often Antifa-aligned individuals. We're seeing with a lot of the rap sheets for those who either impede our law enforcement or who even put their hands on our law enforcement and assault them, we're seeing that they're often repeat offenders.
Yeah, so the Democrats would have you assume that you guys are just driving around and seeing anyone who's brown and harassing them. Obama pretty much said as much in an interview earlier this week, and I know that that is really permeating some left-wing circles. I know that that's in where I live in Los Angeles. A lot of people on the left who are just, that's what they're being told, is that don't go to downtown if you're brown because you're going to get harassed by ICE or DHS. Is that really what's happening?
It's just lies. It's absolutely not true. We have targeted enforcement operations by highly trained and highly professional members of ICE and CBP. And as far as what we've seen out of these rulings, particularly out of Los Angeles, claiming that there's some sort of racial profiling or indiscriminate stops going on, it's absolutely false. I've been on countless ICE operations, and what you see is not only are they highly targeted, but we're using reasonable suspicion, which is protected under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So these smears will continue from these activist judges. We expect it. We will keep on doing what we're doing, which is enforcing the rule of law. And kudos to Secretary Noem and President Trump, because they see this, movie time and time again. They don't care. We're going to continue to do what's right by the American people.
Yeah, they're very tough in this regard. Are the rioters being referred to the DOJ for prosecution? Do you guys feel like you've got the ability to identify them and prosecute them? Are there laws that need to be changed by Congress in order to kind of up the penalties here? Because I kind of can't believe that these are allowed to go on.
No, they're absolutely not allowed to go on. And yes, we've been working with the Department of Justice to ensure that we are prosecuting these individuals who assault law enforcement or impede our operations or otherwise obstruct justice to the fullest extent of the law. And that's where body cameras really come in and why they've been so essential, getting that funding from the big, beautiful bill to make sure that we do have the footage and we have the evidence of these rioters attacking our law enforcement, because we have seen, it's almost a choreography with these rioters. They'll do something to obstruct or they'll assault a law enforcement officer, and suddenly they pull out their phone and they all work together to get what they deem as the most damning footage to go viral on TikTok. So every day it's whack-a-mole. We're trying to thwart that and really give the real information to the American people, which is that these law enforcement officers are protecting federal facilities. They're protecting the public, and they're also protecting themselves as they are enforcing the rule of law.
So Democrats and their friends in the media are pushing a lot of sob stories of illegal aliens arrested by ICE. Can you give us an insight into the type of aliens that you're focused on right now? And because I spoke to Tom Homan about this last week, and he said, if you're here illegally, you've got a problem. But it does seem like you're trying to target the worst criminals.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going after the worst of the worst. That's not just a talking point. That's a fact. 70% of those who we've arrested in the interior of this country either have pending criminal charges or prior criminal convictions. But that doesn't even count, Alex, that other 30%, which they might not have a rap sheet in the U.S., but they might be wanted for murder in another country, have an Interpol notice against them. They might be human rights abusers. I mean, we see this time and time again. Those who do not have criminal histories, if they're arrested, they're also often called a collateral because they're collateral of the target. They might be hanging around a criminal, might be hanging around with a gang member. But we've done a phenomenal job under Secretary Noem and President Trump. Our law enforcement has been phenomenal, picking up more than 3,100 members of Tren de Aragua, vicious gang out of Venezuela who enriches themselves by not just drug trafficking, but human trafficking and sex trafficking of young women. More than 700 known or suspected terrorists have been arrested within the interior of this country. That's just in about 250 days. It is remarkable. And it's also, it's really jarring, Alex, to think about the fact that how many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, really hardened criminals have been walking around this country with impunity for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how many migrants, or how many Americans and migrants, do you think, if we could even add them together, have died because of the pro-migration policies, which again, Tom Homan walked us through this on the show last week, where he just went through all of the ways that Joe Biden intentionally opened up the border. I mean, how many lives have been lost from this, do we think?
You just look at the fentanyl deaths alone, which is about 100,000 annually. And just the fact that we allowed drug mules, drug traffickers who just walk across our border with impunity. Just the families that have been destroyed from this border crisis. Under President Trump, though, fentanyl crossings are down 54%. We are seeing that the cartels are getting increasingly desperate. They're primarily now trying to use waters and maritime trafficking to get drugs onto American soil. But we've seen what President Trump has done with these strikes on these drug vessels near the Caribbean and out of Venezuela. So I think that their drug traffickers are starting to really think twice and take other routes that are not towards the United States of America.
I want to ask about self-deportations because this feels like a big part of the strategy here for you guys to try to get people self-deport. How does this work? And why is this a focus?
Yeah, it's absolutely focused because it is the safest, less resource constraining, and it is the least expensive way to get someone out of this country who's here illegally. So it's a $1,000 exit bonus, and you get a free flight and potentially preserve the opportunity to return to the United States the legal right way. But if you do not take this opportunity, you will be arrested and you will be deported. But Alex, for all of us who are fiscally conservative and want to see the U.S. taxpayer dollar being spent well, I know I certainly do. If a self-deportation is about a 70% savings for the U.S. taxpayer, even with the $1,000 bonus and even with that free flight, because takes so many federal resources, so much law enforcement, training, and really the detention space itself. We have to feed those migrants when they're detained. So to self-deport, which there's been 1.6 million people to do so far, and I believe that's on the conservative end, we really want to be seeing more and more of that, and we're going to be incentivizing it further.
So I know you also have a big recruiting effort to get the agents on board, to get people helping out, ICE, DHS. Can you tell us anything about how many people have joined up? And I think you guys have a big bonus if people do sign up. Can you give us some of that detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I just got the numbers hot off the press earlier. It's 175,000 Americans have applied to join ICE at join.ice.gov. Amazing. It really is encouraging to see that patriots see through the charade of the media. They want to enforce the rule of law and they want to protect our homeland. They saw how the last 4 years, this nation was brought to its knees with this scourge of illegal immigration, and they want to protect their communities and where they come from. So we're encouraging more patriots. It's a very rewarding job. Up to $50,000 bonus. So join.ice.gov.
So Tom Homan said that there's about 20 million illegal aliens who are here. I think that number's going to be higher. I think that's a conservative estimate. And there are some people who are saying, who are on the right, who are critics, who think that the deportations are not moving fast enough. How do you respond to that?
I think that we expect the best, and we should. We know that we have a mountain ahead of us. We need to get these numbers up, and they can rest assured, Congress has given us this funding from that one big, beautiful bill to be hiring more than 10,000 new ICE enforcement officers. I know about 5,000 have been hired, so we're certainly on our way, but we expect those numbers to rise. And it's also a vicious cycle. When you have more arrests, you're going to have more self-deportations because the message is going to get out to those in this country illegally. You will be arrested. There will be consequences. You won't be able to return. So get out now while you still have the shot.
Yeah, this is where some of the left's hand-wringing in the media could backfire because it could remind people that there's a new sheriff in town. Okay, so last one, a fun one. Trisha, you guys are amazing at social media. The Department of Homeland Security social accounts are just always with cutting-edge info and funny memes and just very edgy, but also appropriate in a lot of ways. Can you give us a little insight in the strategy and how that's done? Because it's really an amazing resource.
Yeah, we have a great team of brainiacs here at DHS. It's a young, hungry team, and they see through the charade of the media. And we want to meet people where they are, those who don't typically consume media. Maybe they get a lot of their news on TikTok or Instagram Reels or otherwise, and they're being fed from the mainstream media that ICE is evil, the dehumanization, the demonization of ICE, and other facets of DHS as well. And we want to feed them the truth. There's so many lies and smears out there, and these are brave young men and women who are out there defending our homeland. So, memes are catchy and they're fun, and that we're aiming to really revive patriotism and pride in our heritage, and but also debunk and defang a lot of these attacks against our men and women.
Trisha McLaughlin, could you tell us where people should go to stay up to date with stuff you're doing and what you're working on?
Absolutely. Follow us on X at DHS.gov.
Very good. Well, thanks for the time, and I hope we can do this more often.
I'd love to, Alex. Love to join you.
Thank you. That's today's show. Thanks to Misty and John Cassio, all of you in the audience. Talk to you tomorrow.